Before we begin, if you enjoy relaxing bedtime stories like this, please subscribe to the channel, because these stories are designed to gently shift your mind away from the stress of the day, helping you relax, unwind, and naturally drift off to sleep. Chapter 1. The Last House on Hollow Creek. The road into Hollow Creek wasn't on most maps anymore. GPS lost its signal nearly 20 miles before the old county line, and cell phones became little more than expensive flashlights. That was exactly why Ethan Walker chose it. At 34 years old, Ethan had spent the last 8 years writing articles about abandoned places, forgotten towns, and strange local legends across America. His readers loved ghost stories, but Ethan didn't believe in ghosts. Every mystery had an explanation. Every haunting was caused by old wiring, loose floorboards, wild animals, or people eager to scare outsiders away. At least, that was what he believed. When an email arrived from an elderly woman named Martha Collins, Ethan almost ignored it. If you're looking for a place nobody has explained, come to Hollow Creek. Stay in the Walker house for 1 week. If you leave before sunrise on the 7th morning, you'll never know the truth. There was no signature beyond her name. No phone number. No website. Just an address. Normally, Ethan would have laughed it off. Instead, curiosity won. The drive from Nashville took nearly 6 hours. As highways became 2-lane roads, and 2-lane roads narrowed into cracked pavement winding through endless forests, civilization slowly disappeared. Gas stations became rare. Traffic vanished. Even the birds seemed quieter. Around sunset, Ethan reached an old wooden sign leaning at an awkward angle. Welcome to Hollow Creek. Population 42. Someone had painted over the number many times. Under the newest layer of white paint, Ethan could still make out older numbers. 73, 58, 49, 42. He parked beside the sign and took a photograph. People moving away, he muttered. Or something else. The words came from behind him. Ethan turned sharply. An elderly woman stood beside the trees as though she had always been there. She wore a faded blue dress that looked decades old and held a wicker basket filled with apples. You must be Martha. She smiled politely. I hoped you'd come. You emailed me? I asked my grandson to send it. Ethan nodded. I'm here about the Walker house. I know. You own it. No. Then who does? She looked toward the forest. It owns itself now. Ethan chuckled. That's a good line. She didn't smile. I wasn't joking. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Martha handed him one of the apples. You'll need food. I brought supplies. They won't last. I have enough for a week. You won't eat much after the 3rd night. Ethan laughed again, although something about the way she spoke made the sound feel forced. I appreciate the warning. She pointed down the road. The house is 3 miles ahead. Anything I should know? Yes. She looked directly into his eyes. If someone knocks after midnight. She stopped speaking. Ethan waited. Don't answer. Who's going to knock? No one alive. The silence that followed felt strangely heavy. Ethan thanked her, climbed back into his SUV, and continued down the road. In the rearview mirror, Martha remained standing exactly where she'd been. She didn't wave. She didn't move. She simply watched until the trees swallowed her from sight. The Walker house stood alone atop a small hill overlooking Hollow Creek. It was enormous, 3 stories tall, dark gray wood, wide wraparound porch, tall windows covered by faded curtains. The architecture suggested it had been built sometime around 1905, though years of neglect had left paint peeling from every wall. Still, the structure looked surprisingly solid. An old iron gate stood open. No lock, no fence, just an invitation. As Ethan stepped onto the porch, he noticed something odd. There was no dust. The wooden boards were clean. Someone had swept recently. Yet no cars were parked nearby. He knocked anyway. Nothing. After trying the handle, the front door slowly creaked open on its own. "Hello." Only silence answered. Inside, the air smelled of old cedar, fireplace ash, and something faintly sweet, almost like dried flowers. Furniture still filled every room. Books lined shelves. Family photographs covered the walls. Everything appeared untouched. It looked less like an abandoned house, and more like someone had stepped outside only minutes ago. Ethan unpacked his camera equipment and tripod. "This place is incredible," he whispered into his recorder. "The locals probably exaggerate everything. It'll make a great article." As he explored the first floor, one photograph caught his attention. A family portrait. Father, mother, 2 young daughters, 1 teenage son. Everyone smiled except the youngest girl. She stared directly into the camera with an expression that felt strangely afraid. Ethan flipped the frame over. Written neatly across the back were 6 words. "Never answer after the 3rd knock." He frowned. Creepy decoration. Probably planted for tourists. He placed it back exactly where he'd found it. Outside, darkness settled across Hollow Creek. The forest became impossibly quiet. No crickets, no owls, no wind, only silence. Around 11:45 p.m., Ethan sat in the living room editing photographs. His flashlight rested beside him. The fireplace crackled softly. Everything felt peaceful. Then, one knock. Slow, heavy, from the front door. Ethan looked toward the entrance. Probably Martha checking on him. Or maybe curious neighbors. He stood, walked halfway across the room. Another knock. Slightly louder. He smiled. They're really committed to the legend. He reached for the doorknob. Then remembered Martha's warning. If someone knocks after midnight, don't answer. He checked his watch. 11:59 p.m. Still not midnight. He hesitated. Exactly 60 seconds later, the old grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 12 times. Midnight. The house became perfectly still. Then came the 3rd knock. It wasn't louder. It wasn't faster. But somehow, it sounded as if it came from the other side of the wood, and from inside the house at the very same time. Ethan froze. Then a calm little girl's voice drifted through the door. "Please." A long pause. "Dad." Ethan's heartbeat stopped. Because he had never told anyone. His daughter had died 3 years earlier. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The voice outside the door. Ethan stood motionless, his hand hovering inches from the brass doorknob. The little girl's voice had vanished as suddenly as it appeared. The grandfather clock continued its slow, steady ticking. Tick, tick, tick. His breathing became shallow. "No," he whispered to himself. "That's not possible." His daughter, Lily, had been gone for 3 years. A drunk driver had crossed the center line on a rainy October evening. Ethan hadn't spoken publicly about it. He had deleted every social media account after the funeral and moved across the country to start over. No stranger in this forgotten town could possibly know her voice. Yet, it had sounded exactly like her. Not almost. Not similar. Exactly. He forced himself to breathe. "This is a recording," he said aloud. "Some kind of speaker." His own voice sounded weak inside the enormous house. He grabbed his flashlight and slowly approached the front door again. Nothing. No footsteps. No shadows beneath the crack. Only silence. Then another voice. A man's voice. Low. Calm. Almost comforting. "Ethan." His blood ran cold. Nobody had called him by name since arriving in Hollow Creek. "Open the door." The voice sounded only inches away. "We just want to talk." Ethan stepped backward. His logical mind raced through possibilities. Hidden speakers. A prank. Someone watching through cameras. He pulled open the curtain beside the front window. The porch was empty. Moonlight stretched across the wooden floorboards. The rocking chair near the railing moved gently back and forth. Creak, creak, creak. There wasn't enough wind to move it. Ethan swung the front door open before he could stop himself. The porch was deserted. No footprints. No parked vehicles. No movement anywhere. The forest surrounding the house stood perfectly still beneath the pale moon. He stepped outside. "Who's there?" Only his own voice echoed across the trees. A faint smell drifted through the cool night air. Lilacs. His heart tightened. Lily's favorite flowers had been lilacs. He hadn't smelled them since the funeral. "Ethan." The whisper came from behind him. He spun around. Nothing. The open doorway behind him revealed the warm glow of the fireplace. The house looked peaceful. Safe. Then the front door slammed shut. Bang. The sound echoed across the hill. Ethan jumped. He hurried toward the door and grabbed the handle. Locked. He frowned. "I didn't lock it." He twisted harder. The handle refused to move. Inside, the grandfather clock began chiming again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It continued. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Ethan counted all the way to 32 before the chimes finally stopped. His watch still read 12:07 a.m. A grandfather clock shouldn't chime 32 times. Before he could think about it further, the lock clicked. The door slowly opened on its own. The living room was exactly as he had left it, except the family photograph was no longer on the fireplace mantel. He searched the room. Nothing. The frame had disappeared. Trying to stay calm, Ethan convinced himself he must have moved it while unpacking. Stress made people overlook obvious things. He repeated that thought several times. Stress made people overlook obvious things. He picked up his camera and continued documenting the house. The lens passed over dusty bookshelves, antique furniture, faded wallpaper, and a narrow staircase leading to the second floor. Everything seemed ordinary again, until he reviewed the photographs. In the first image, the staircase was empty. In the second, someone stood halfway up the stairs. A little girl wearing a white dress. Her long dark hair covered most of her face. Ethan stared at the screen. "I don't remember seeing her." He zoomed in. The photograph became grainy. The girl's head appeared tilted slightly to one side. Both of her hands rested behind her back. He opened the next picture. The staircase was empty again. He looked up. No one stood there. His pulse quickened. Camera glitch. That explanation sounded reasonable. Digital artifacts happened all the time. He deleted the image. A moment later, the deleted photograph reappeared. He frowned. No. He deleted it again. The screen flickered. When the gallery reopened, there were now 2 copies. A cold sensation crept across his shoulders. His camera suddenly emitted a loud beep. Battery critically low. Impossible. He had installed a fully charged battery less than 3 hours earlier. He removed it. The battery felt unusually warm. Almost hot. He placed it on the coffee table. Seconds later, it rolled off the table by itself. Ethan stared. The floor wasn't uneven. The battery rolled across the hardwood floor, past the fireplace, toward the hallway, then stopped directly in front of a narrow wooden door beneath the staircase. He hadn't noticed the door before. It was small, barely tall enough for an adult to enter without bending over. Unlike the rest of the house, this door had 3 heavy locks, all unlocked. A brass plaque above the frame read, "Cellar." The smell hit him immediately. Not rot, not mold, wet earth, like freshly turned soil after heavy rain. He hesitated. Every instinct told him to leave it alone. Instead, he unlocked the first latch. Click. The second. Click. The third. Click. The hinges groaned as the door opened inward. A steep staircase disappeared into darkness. His flashlight barely reached the bottom. Stone walls, concrete floor, shelves, old wooden crates. Nothing unusual. He descended slowly. Each step creaked beneath his weight. The air grew colder with every step. When he reached the basement floor, he swept the flashlight across the room. Empty shelves, rusted tools, broken furniture, an old furnace. Nothing that explained the voices. Then he noticed something carved into one of the support beams. Not initials, not dates. Hundreds of names. Every name had a year beside it. The years stretched across nearly a century. Most names had a single line carved through them. One name didn't. Ethan Walker. His flashlight trembled. He hadn't carved it. He had never been here before. Yet his name looked as old as every other carving. As he stepped closer, another detail emerged. Beneath his name, someone had begun carving a date. Only the first 2 numbers were finished. 20. Fresh wood shavings still rested on the floor below the beam. Whatever had carved it hadn't finished. Not yet. Then, from somewhere in the darkness behind him, came the unmistakable sound of a child quietly laughing. Not loudly, not maliciously, just softly enough to make the silence feel alive. Ethan slowly turned his flashlight toward the sound. The beam landed on the far wall. Someone had written a sentence there in what looked like dried mud. Or something much darker. You opened the wrong door. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Journal Beneath the Floor. Ethan's flashlight trembled as the beam rested on the message. You opened the wrong door. For several seconds, he couldn't move. The letters looked uneven, as though they had been written in a hurry. He crouched closer, expecting to find paint or old brick dust. Instead, the words crumbled slightly at the edges. It was dried clay, mixed with something dark. He swallowed hard and stepped backward. Someone's been down here recently. His voice echoed through the basement. No answer. The child's laughter had stopped. Only the faint hum of the old furnace remained. Trying to steady his nerves, Ethan swept the flashlight across the room again. Every shelf was coated with dust. Every crate looked untouched for decades. Except one. A small wooden trunk sat against the far wall. Unlike everything else in the basement, it was perfectly clean. Not a single speck of dust rested on its lid, as if someone had wiped it only hours earlier. Ethan approached cautiously. There was no lock. He lifted the lid. Inside lay several yellowed newspapers tied together with twine, an old leather-bound journal, and a silver pocket watch. The watch had stopped at exactly 12:03, the same time his camera battery had died. He pressed the winding knob. Nothing happened. The hands refused to move. He set it aside and unfolded the oldest newspaper. The headline read, "Local family disappears without a trace." The article was dated October 14th, 1959. According to the report, the Walker family had vanished overnight. Neighbors claimed they heard knocking throughout the night, followed by children's voices calling for help. Sheriff deputies searched every room, every closet, every inch of the property. No bodies were found. No signs of struggle. Only one strange detail puzzled investigators. Every clock inside the house had stopped at 12:03 a.m. Ethan frowned. That had to be coincidence. He reached for another newspaper. This one carried a different headline. State Police Abandon Investigation into Hollow Creek House. The article described 3 investigators who entered the home in 1976. Only one returned. The surviving deputy reportedly resigned 3 days later. When questioned, he repeated the same sentence over and over. "It learns your voice." No further explanation appeared. Ethan rubbed his forehead. These newspapers looked authentic. Real print. Real photographs. Real names. Someone had spent enormous effort creating this collection if it was a hoax. His attention shifted to the leather journal. The cover had no title. Only a single set of initials pressed into the leather. J.W. Inside, the first page contained careful handwriting. If you're reading this, the house already knows your name. Mine is James Walker. I built this house in 1907 because my wife believed this hill was blessed. She was wrong. Ethan slowly turned the page. The knocking began in winter. Always 3 knocks. Never 2. Never 4. The voices changed every night. Sometimes strangers. Sometimes neighbors. Sometimes people we loved. Another page. My youngest daughter opened the door. She said Grandma was outside. My mother had been buried for 6 years. Another. Whatever stands outside cannot enter unless invited. But once you answer. The sentence ended abruptly. The remaining page had been torn away. Ethan searched the journal for the missing sheet. Nothing. Only blank pages followed until the final entry. The handwriting looked rushed, almost desperate. If the basement door ever opens again, do not stay until sunrise. The house remembers every family that enters. Eventually, it begins adding new names. A loud thump echoed from upstairs. Ethan froze. Another thump. Heavy footsteps crossed the living room ceiling. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was walking across the floor above him. He switched off his flashlight. Silence. The footsteps continued. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each step creaked directly overhead. Whoever it was seemed in no hurry. Ethan reached into his backpack and pulled out the small digital recorder he carried for interviews. He pressed record. The tiny red light blinked. The footsteps stopped. Completely. The basement became silent again. He waited nearly a minute before switching his flashlight back on. The beam landed on the journal. A new sentence had appeared beneath the final entry. The ink looked wet. He's listening now. Ethan stared. I didn't. He knew those words hadn't been there. He had just read the page. His breathing quickened. The recorder in his hand suddenly crackled with static. Then a voice emerged. Not from upstairs. From the recorder itself. Ethan. His own voice answered. I'm here. His stomach tightened. He had never spoken those words. The recorder continued. Ethan. I'm here. Ethan. I'm here. Each repetition became slightly distorted, slightly slower, until the final response no longer sounded human. I'm here. The recording ended. The screen displayed a timestamp. Recorded October 14th, 1959. Ethan nearly dropped the recorder. It wasn't possible. The device was brand new. He had purchased it only 2 weeks earlier. Another sound interrupted his thoughts. Tap, tap, tap. Something rolled across the basement floor behind him. He turned. The silver pocket watch. It had somehow traveled nearly 8 feet across the room. It stopped against his boot. The hands were moving now. Not forward. Backward. 12:02. 12:01. 12 o'clock. 11:59. As the second hand continued reversing, the basement temperature plunged. His breath became visible. The walls groaned. Above him, every floorboard in the house creaked at once. Then came the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. Slowly, followed by 3 deliberate knocks. Not on the outside. On the inside. Someone, or something, had entered the house. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Man in the Hallway. The 3 knocks echoed through the house. Slow. Measured. Impossible. Ethan remained frozen in the basement, staring toward the staircase. The front door had opened. He was certain of it. But the knocking hadn't come from outside. It had come from somewhere inside the house. A cold draft drifted down the basement stairs, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and old perfume. Then came another sound. Footsteps. Not hurried. Not heavy. Just a calm, steady walk across the hardwood floor above. One step. Pause. Another step. Pause. As though someone was carefully listening between each movement. Ethan switched off his flashlight. Darkness swallowed the basement. He stood perfectly still. The footsteps reached the basement door. Silence. His pulse thundered in his ears. The old wooden door at the top of the stairs creaked open by itself. A thin strip of pale moonlight stretched down the staircase. Someone was standing there. Ethan couldn't see a face. Only a silhouette. Tall, broad shoulders. A long coat hanging almost to the floor. The figure didn't move. It simply stood at the top of the stairs, watching. Ethan held his breath. After nearly 30 seconds, the figure slowly raised one arm. It pointed into the darkness behind Ethan. Not at him, past him, toward the far corner of the basement. Instinct told Ethan not to look. Every horror story he'd ever heard warned against exactly that. But curiosity won. He slowly turned his flashlight back on. The beam swept across the stone wall. Old shelves, broken chairs, a rusted furnace. Nothing unusual. Then, a little girl stood in the corner. She wore the same white dress from the photograph. Her bare feet were covered in dirt. Long black hair hung over her face. Both hands remained hidden behind her back. She wasn't there a second ago. Ethan spun back toward the staircase. The tall man had vanished. Only the open basement door remained. When Ethan looked toward the corner again, the little girl was gone. His breathing became uneven. "No," he whispered. "I'm hallucinating." He repeated the words several times. Lack of sleep. Stress. Low blood sugar. Reason. He needed reason. He climbed the basement stairs as quietly as possible. The living room was exactly as he'd left it. The fireplace still burned. His backpack rested beside the sofa. Nothing appeared disturbed, except the family photograph had returned to the mantel. Ethan slowly approached it. This time, something had changed. There were 6 people in the picture, not 5. Standing beside the father was a tall man wearing a black overcoat. His face was blurred, as though the camera had failed to focus. Yet everyone else in the photograph remained perfectly sharp. Even stranger. Every member of the family was now looking directly at him. Not toward the photographer. Toward Ethan. He felt a chill race through his body. "I'm done taking pictures." He reached for the frame. The glass felt icy. As he lifted it, something slipped out from behind the backing. A folded piece of paper. Old. Yellowed. The handwriting matched the journal from the basement. He never comes through the front door. He waits until someone opens it for him. After that, he walks the halls every night. A loud crash came from upstairs. Ethan jumped. It sounded like furniture being dragged across the floor. Then another crash, followed by a child laughing. Not one child. Several. Their laughter echoed through the ceiling. Somewhere above him, little feet began running from one end of the hallway to the other. Back and forth. Back and forth. Too fast. Far too fast. The floor vibrated beneath him. Then everything stopped. Silence returned. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and camera. "If someone's up there, I'm filming it." His confidence sounded forced. The staircase leading to the second floor groaned beneath each step. The wallpaper peeled from the walls in long faded strips. Family portraits lined the staircase. He hadn't noticed them before. Every portrait showed different families, different decades, different clothing. The only thing they shared, each photograph included the same blurred man in the black coat, always standing in the background, always just behind the family. Ethan hurried past them. At the top of the stairs stretched a long hallway with 6 closed doors. The moonlight spilling through the windows painted pale rectangles across the floor. Everything was still. He checked the first bedroom. Empty. The second. Empty. The third contained an untouched nursery. A wooden rocking horse stood beside a small crib. Dust covered every surface, except the horse. It slowly rocked forward, backward, forward, backward. No wind, no sound, just the gentle movement. Creak, creak, creak. Ethan backed toward the doorway. The rocking stopped. He turned into the hallway. Every bedroom door that had been open was now closed. One by one, the doorknobs began turning. Click, 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 click. Every door opened at exactly the same speed. Inside each room stood someone. A woman, an old man, a teenage boy, 2 children, and at the very end of the hallway, the tall man in the black coat. None of them moved. None of them blinked. They simply stared. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to run. He took 1 slow step backward. Every figure took 1 slow step forward. He took another step. So did they. Not walking, gliding. Their feet never lifted from the floor. The hallway suddenly felt much longer than before. Far longer than the outside of the house could possibly allow. The walls stretched into darkness. The ceiling seemed higher. The windows disappeared. Only the figures remained. The tall man finally lifted his head. For the first time, Ethan could see his face. Or rather, where his face should have been. There was nothing there. No eyes, no mouth, no skin. Only endless darkness beneath the brim of his old hat. Then, from inside that impossible darkness, came a voice. Soft, calm, almost welcoming. You've stayed long enough. The lights throughout the house went out. The fireplace died instantly. The hallway disappeared into complete darkness. Then Ethan felt something cold wrap gently around his wrist. It wasn't a hand. It felt more like fingers made of ice. And just inches from his ear, someone whispered, "Don't let him know you're awake." End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Room That Shouldn't Exist. The whisper faded into the darkness. Don't let him know you're awake. Ethan's entire body locked in place. Something icy still encircled his wrist. It wasn't squeezing him. It wasn't pulling him. It was simply holding him. His breathing became painfully slow. He remembered something his grandfather had once told him when they camped in the Appalachian Mountains. When you're terrified, don't make the fear louder. Fear listens. At the time, Ethan thought it was just an old saying. Now, standing in complete darkness, it suddenly felt like advice. He closed his eyes. Not because it would help. Because he couldn't bear looking into the blackness any longer. The house became impossibly quiet. No wind. No footsteps. No creaking wood. Even the old grandfather clock had stopped. Then, the cold fingers released his wrist. A faint glow slowly returned to the hallway. Moonlight. The power hadn't come back. The clouds outside had simply moved away from the moon. Ethan opened his eyes. The hallway looked normal again. The 6 bedroom doors stood open. Every room was empty. The figures were gone. He immediately looked at his wrist. 5 pale marks circled it. Not bruises. Not scratches. They looked like frost had burned the skin. He rubbed them. They didn't disappear. His flashlight lay on the floor several feet away. When he picked it up, it flickered once before shining steadily. The beam swept across the hallway. Everything appeared exactly as it had when he first arrived. Except, there were now 7 doors. He frowned. I'm sure there were 6. He counted again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The final door stood at the far end of the hallway. It hadn't been there before. Its wood looked newer than the others, almost untouched by time. Unlike the white-painted doors lining the hall, this one was stained a deep black. No doorknob, no keyhole, only a brass plaque. It read, Room 7. Ethan slowly approached. His heartbeat echoed in his ears. The floorboards beneath him groaned with each step. When he reached the door, he noticed something else. The wallpaper surrounding it was different. The floral pattern stopped abruptly, replaced by plain gray plaster, as though this section of the hallway had been built years later. He placed his hand against the door. It felt warm. Every other wall in the house had been cold. This door felt almost alive. Before he could think twice, it slowly swung inward by itself. No hinges squeaked. No wood creaked. It simply opened. The room beyond wasn't what he expected. It wasn't a bedroom. It was an office. Large oak desk. Leather chair. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A fireplace burned quietly in one corner. Fresh coffee steamed from a porcelain mug. Someone had been here moments ago. Everything looked modern, far newer than the rest of the house. A laptop sat open on the desk. Its screen glowed softly. Ethan stepped inside. The moment both feet crossed the doorway, the hallway behind him disappeared. Not the door. The entire hallway. He spun around. Instead of the second floor, a brick wall stood behind him. Solid. Unbroken. His stomach tightened. No. He pushed against it. Cold brick. No doorway. No exit. His flashlight beam revealed another strange detail. There were no windows. Yet sunlight poured into the office. Bright afternoon sunlight. He checked his watch. 12:46 a.m. The room appeared to exist in an entirely different time. A soft humming sound drew his attention to the laptop. Words began appearing on the screen. No keyboard moved. No hands typed. The letters simply appeared. Welcome, Ethan. He stared. More words followed. You've been asking questions for years. Tonight, it's your turn to answer. He backed away from the desk. The typing continued. Question 1. Do you remember the last thing your daughter said to you? His chest tightened. He hadn't thought about that day in months. He refused to answer. The screen remained still for several seconds. Then another sentence appeared. "You don't, but we do." The laptop speakers crackled. Static filled the room. Then, a familiar little voice. "Daddy." Ethan's knees nearly gave out. It was Lily. Exactly as he remembered. Soft, gentle, sleepy. "Daddy, are we almost home?" The recording stopped. That had been her final sentence. The last words she ever spoke before the crash. A memory he had buried beneath years of guilt. His eyes filled with tears. "No." He whispered. "No, this isn't real." The fireplace suddenly flared brighter. The room grew warmer. The laptop typed again. Question 2. How many lies have you told yourself? The coffee mug on the desk slowly slid toward the edge. Without anyone touching it. It stopped inches from falling. Steam still rose from the cup. Someone had poured it recently. Ethan cautiously looked around the room. Still empty. Then he noticed a framed photograph sitting beside the laptop. It showed him, standing on the front porch of the Walker house, smiling. The date printed in the corner made his blood run cold. October 14th, 2028. 2 years in the future. In the photograph, Ethan looked older. His beard had turned gray. His clothes were worn. His expression was hollow. Behind him stood the tall man in the black coat. One hand rested gently on Ethan's shoulder, as if they had known each other for years. Ethan dropped the frame. The glass shattered. Every light in the office went out. The afternoon sunlight vanished. Darkness swallowed the room once again. Somewhere behind him, a chair slowly scraped across the wooden floor. He wasn't alone anymore. A man's calm voice broke the silence. "You weren't supposed to find this room until your 7th night." A match struck. A single flame flickered to life. Across the office, seated calmly behind the oak desk, was an elderly man in a black suit. His silver hair was neatly combed. His hands rested on the desktop. He smiled politely. "You've arrived much earlier than expected." The old man folded his hands and tilted his head. Then he asked, almost casually, "Would you like to know why every family that enters this house eventually believes it has always lived here?" End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Caretaker's Truth. The old man waited patiently. The match burned between his fingers, casting a warm circle of light across the office. Beyond that circle, the room dissolved into darkness. Ethan didn't answer. Every instinct told him to find a way out. The brick wall behind him still felt solid beneath his hand. There was no door anymore. No hallway. No staircase. Only the office. The old man smiled. "Most people ask where they are." His voice carried no threat, no anger, only the calm tone of someone beginning a familiar conversation. "You didn't." Ethan finally spoke. "Who are you?" The man looked almost amused. "That's the wrong question." "I don't care." "You will." He placed the burning match into a crystal ashtray. The flame died instantly. Yet somehow, the room remained softly illuminated. "I've been called many things," the man said. "Caretaker, groundskeeper, watchman." He paused. "The house simply calls me Samuel." Ethan studied him carefully. He looked to be in his late 70s. Neatly trimmed beard, wrinkled hands, kind eyes. Nothing about him resembled the faceless figure Ethan had seen upstairs. "You own this place?" Samuel chuckled. "No." "Then who does?" Samuel looked toward the ceiling. "No one living." Silence settled over the office. Finally, Ethan stepped closer to the desk. "I've seen people." Samuel nodded. "I know. I've heard voices." "I know. I saw a little girl." Samuel's expression changed. For the first time, genuine sadness crossed his face. "So did everyone else." Ethan rested both hands on the desk. "I'm leaving." Samuel smiled again. "No. I'm serious." "So am I." "You can't stop me." "I don't have to." Samuel slowly opened a drawer. Instead of reaching for a weapon, he removed a faded map of the house. He spread it across the desk. At first glance, it looked ordinary. First floor, second floor, basement. Then Ethan noticed something impossible. Every few seconds, the floor plan changed. Rooms shifted. Hallways stretched. Doors appeared where none had existed before. The house itself was moving. Samuel tapped one corner of the map. "This is where you're standing." A tiny black dot pulsed inside room 7. Ethan watched in disbelief. The dot suddenly moved, without either of them moving an inch. It drifted slowly through the wall, into another room. Samuel sighed. "It does that. This isn't possible." "You're right." "Then explain it." Samuel leaned back in his chair. The Walker house wasn't built on cursed ground. He paused. It became cursed because of what was buried underneath. Ethan frowned. "The basement." Samuel shook his head. "Much deeper." "What's down there?" Samuel remained silent for several seconds. Then he quietly answered. "A doorway. A tunnel." "No." Another pause. "A doorway that should never have been opened." Ethan felt the temperature in the room begin to fall again. Samuel noticed. "He hears us whenever we talk about it." "Who?" "The man without a face." The office lights flickered. Samuel lowered his voice. "He isn't the house. He isn't a ghost. He isn't even the first thing that came through." Before Ethan could respond, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Not on the office door. On the brick wall behind him. Knock. 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 Samuel closed his eyes. "He found you." The knocking stopped. A child's voice followed. "Mr. Samuel." Samuel didn't answer. Another knock. "Please." "It's cold." Ethan recognized the voice immediately. The little girl in the white dress. Samuel remained perfectly still. The girl spoke again. "My mommy can't find me." Tears filled her voice. "I don't want to be alone." Ethan turned toward the wall. "We have to help her." Samuel spoke sharply. "No. She's just a child." "No. What if she's alive?" Samuel's eyes met Ethan's. "Listen carefully. The house never asks. It borrows." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" "It borrows memories. It borrows voices. It borrows faces." The girl's crying became louder. "Please." "I'm scared," Samuel whispered. It already knows exactly which voice you can't ignore. The crying changed. Without warning, the child became an elderly woman. "Ethan," his mother's voice. "I fell. Help me." His heartbeat accelerated. "No." Another voice. His father. "Proud of you, son." A sentence Ethan had waited his entire childhood to hear. Then, "Lily. Daddy. I can't find you." Ethan stepped toward the wall before realizing what he was doing. Samuel slammed his palm against the desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Every voice stopped instantly. The silence felt almost violent. Samuel stared at him. "Do you understand now?" Ethan slowly nodded. "It learns." Samuel smiled sadly. "Exactly." He reached into another drawer and removed a small brass key. Unlike every other object in the room, the key looked brand new. "I've been waiting a long time to give this to someone." Ethan accepted it carefully. "What does it open?" Samuel hesitated. "The only door the house cannot unlock by itself." "And where is it?" Samuel looked directly into Ethan's eyes. "You've already walked past it twice." Before Ethan could ask another question, the office trembled. Books flew from the shelves. The coffee cup shattered against the floor. The walls groaned. Samuel stood abruptly. "He knows I told you." The room shook harder. Cracks spread across the ceiling. Dust rained onto the desk. Samuel pushed the map into Ethan's hands. "Whatever happens, do not let him convince you that you're dreaming." The office suddenly went dark. A deep, resonant voice echoed from every direction at once. Not loud, not angry, just impossibly old. "You've broken the rules, Samuel." A long silence followed. Then Samuel whispered, "I'm sorry." The darkness swallowed him. When Ethan's flashlight finally flickered back to life, the office was gone. He was standing alone in the second-floor hallway. The 7 doors had disappeared. Only 6 remained. The brass key rested in his hand, and lying on the floor at his feet was Samuel's empty black suit. There was no body inside it, only a small handwritten note tucked into the collar. It read, "Don't go into the attic after 3:03 a.m. That's when the house starts remembering you." End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. The Attic That Remembered. Ethan stood alone in the hallway, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The black suit lay crumpled at his feet. It looked as though someone had stepped out of it only seconds earlier. The sleeves were still slightly raised, as if invisible arms had only just slipped away. He crouched beside it. The fabric felt warm. Not warm from sunlight. Warm from a human body. He picked up the handwritten note again. "Don't go into the attic after 3:03 a.m. That's when the house starts remembering you." He checked his watch. 2:41 a.m. 22 minutes. His heart pounded. For the first time since arriving, he had a deadline. He folded the note carefully and placed it inside his jacket. The brass key remained in his pocket. He still had no idea which door it belonged to. The hallway was silent. Too silent. Even the old house had stopped creaking. It felt as though the building itself was holding its breath. Ethan started toward the staircase. Halfway there, he heard humming. A soft melody. Gentle. Familiar. His footsteps stopped instantly. He knew that tune. Lily used to hum it every night before falling asleep. He hadn't heard it since the accident. The sound drifted from the nursery, the same room where the wooden rocking horse had moved by itself. He closed his eyes. No. The humming continued. It wasn't loud. It wasn't pleading. It simply existed, like someone waiting. Against every instinct, Ethan walked toward the nursery. The door stood slightly open. He pushed it wider. The room looked almost peaceful. Moonlight poured through the window. Dust floated lazily in the air. The crib remained untouched. The rocking horse stood perfectly still. In the corner sat a small wooden music box. Its lid was open. The tiny ballerina inside slowly turned in circles. No one had wound it. Yet it continued playing. The melody stopped. The ballerina froze. A child's voice quietly asked, "Daddy?" Ethan's chest tightened. He looked around the room. No one. Only shadows. Then, a little girl stepped out from behind the curtain. She looked no older than 7. Blonde hair. Blue pajamas. Bare feet. For one impossible second, she was Lily, exactly as Ethan remembered her. She smiled. The same crooked smile. The same dimple on her left cheek. "Daddy." She took one small step toward him. "I've been waiting." Every part of Ethan wanted to run across the room and hold her. Instead, Samuel's warning echoed in his mind. The house borrows voices. It borrows faces. His eyes filled with tears. "You aren't Lily." The little girl's smile faded. "You don't believe me?" "No." "I was cold." "No." "I missed you." Ethan felt tears running down his face. "I know." The girl tilted her head. "You left me." His knees weakened. Those words had haunted him every night since the crash. "I know. You promised we'd get ice cream." "I know. You said we'd be home soon." His breathing became uneven. The room suddenly felt much colder. The girl's smile slowly stretched wider. Far wider than any human smile could. Her cheeks split unnaturally. Her eyes became completely black. "You still blame yourself." The voice no longer belonged to Lily. It belonged to something much older, much deeper. The little girl's body began trembling violently. Bones cracked beneath her skin. Her arms lengthened. Her fingers touched the floor. The smile stretched from ear to ear. Then, she laughed. Not like a child. Like dozens of children laughing at once. Ethan stumbled backward into the hallway. The nursery door slammed shut. The laughter stopped instantly. His watch beeped. 2:56 a.m. 7 minutes until 3:03. He hurried downstairs. The first floor looked different. Furniture had shifted. Paintings hung on different walls. Windows appeared where there had been none. The house was changing again. As he crossed the living room, he noticed something that hadn't been there before. A grandfather clock. Not the one from the hallway. Another. This one stood beside the fireplace. Its pendulum swung slowly. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The hands pointed to 3:02. His own watch still read 2:57. The clock was 5 minutes ahead. Without warning, every clock in the house began chiming. Not together. One after another. Different tones. Different rhythms. Hundreds of chimes echoed through the walls. The sound became deafening. Pictures rattled. Windows vibrated. The floor trembled beneath his feet. Then, every clock stopped at once. The pendulum froze. Silence. His flashlight flickered. One flash. Darkness. Another flash. In that brief burst of light, someone stood beside the staircase. The tall man in the black coat. Motionless. Watching. The next flash. He was closer. The next. Only a few feet away. Still faceless. Still silent. Ethan turned and ran. The front door came into view. He grabbed the handle. Locked. He pulled harder. Nothing. Behind him came slow footsteps. 1, 2, 3. Not chasing. Simply walking. Certain he couldn't escape. Ethan looked around desperately. Then he noticed something strange beneath the staircase. A narrow wooden door. Small. Almost hidden by the wallpaper. He had never seen it before. Above the frame, barely visible beneath layers of peeling paint, were 3 carved words. Not the attic. His heart skipped. Samuel had said he'd already passed the correct door twice. Could this be it? He pulled the brass key from his pocket. It fit perfectly. The lock clicked. Behind him, the footsteps stopped. The faceless man spoke for the first time since the hallway. His voice came from everywhere at once. If you open that door... A pause. You'll remember. Ethan turned the key. The hidden door slowly opened inward. Instead of another room, a long staircase descended into darkness. Cool air drifted upward, carrying the smell of rain and distant ocean waves. That made no sense. The nearest coastline was hundreds of miles away. Behind him, the grandfather clock struck a single chime. 3:03 a.m. Every light in the house went out. 1,000 whispers filled the darkness, all speaking the same sentence. Welcome home, Ethan. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. The stairs beneath the house. The whispers stopped all at once. The silence that followed felt heavier than the voices. Ethan stood at the top of the hidden staircase, his hand still gripping the brass key. Behind him, the Walker house had disappeared into complete darkness. Ahead of him, the narrow stairway descended farther than his flashlight could reach. One sentence echoed through his mind. If you open that door, you'll remember. He didn't want to remember. He wanted to leave. But every path behind him had already vanished. Taking a slow breath, Ethan stepped onto the first stair. The wooden step didn't creak. Neither did the second, or the third. It was as though the staircase wasn't part of the old house at all. The deeper he descended, the warmer the air became. That made no sense. The basement had been freezing. This place felt almost comfortable. After what seemed like several minutes, the wooden stairs ended. His boots touched smooth stone. The tunnel before him stretched into darkness. Its walls were carved from solid rock. Dozens of old lanterns hung along the passage. As Ethan approached the first one, its flame ignited by itself. Then the second. Then the third. One by one, every lantern lit the tunnel ahead, as though something unseen was walking just beyond him, lighting the way. The passage curved gently. Soon, the walls changed. The stone gave way to brick. The brick gave way to polished wood. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Ethan stopped. His flashlight slowly swept across the room. It looked like an old train station. Benches, ticket windows, iron columns, a giant clock hanging from the ceiling. Everything was covered in decades of dust. Above the empty ticket booth hung a faded wooden sign. Hollow Creek Station. Another sign beneath it read, "Last departure, October 14th, 1959. Ethan frowned. There was never a train station here. His voice echoed through the chamber. No answer came. He walked toward the platform. Rusted train tracks disappeared into a pitch-black tunnel. The rails looked ancient, untouched, yet strangely clean. No rust rested on the top of the steel, as though something still traveled along them. He reached the platform's edge. The air flowing from the tunnel carried a familiar scent. Lilacs. Again. Then came a distant sound. A train whistle. Very faint. Miles away. Except there were no active railroads anywhere near Hollow Creek. The whistle came again. Closer this time. The giant station clock ticked once. Its hands moved to 3:03. Without warning, every lantern dimmed. A woman's voice echoed across the empty station. "Tickets, please." Ethan turned. The ticket booth was no longer empty. An elderly woman stood behind the dusty window. She wore a dark blue uniform that looked almost a century old. Her silver hair was neatly tied into a bun. She smiled warmly. "You're late." Ethan approached cautiously. "I don't need a ticket." The woman tilted her head. "Oh, everyone says that." She opened an enormous leather ledger resting on the counter. Thousands of names filled its pages. She slowly ran one finger down the list. "Walker." She stopped. "There you are." His stomach tightened. "You've been expected." "I've never been here." She looked genuinely surprised. "Haven't you?" She turned the ledger toward him. Written in neat black ink was his full name, Ethan James Walker. Below it appeared dozens of dates, every few years, as though someone had recorded repeated visits. "I've never." His voice faltered. One date caught his attention. October 16th, 1994. He was 8 years old. A memory stirred. Just out of reach. Rain. A family road trip. His father stopping the car. An old wooden bridge. A hill. A large gray house. His breathing slowed. "No." He whispered, "We've never been here." The woman smiled sadly. "That's what everyone believes." She gently closed the ledger. "The house doesn't steal memories. It hides them." The distant train whistle sounded again. Much louder. Metal wheels echoed through the tunnel. Something enormous was approaching. The woman looked toward the tracks. "It's almost here." "What is?" "The midnight train." Ethan stared. "There isn't a train." She didn't answer. Instead, She reached beneath the counter and produced an old brass ticket, exactly like the key Samuel had given him. She placed it on the counter. "One way. I don't want it." "I know." "No. You misunderstand." She pushed it closer. "You've already bought it." A bright light appeared deep inside the tunnel. It grew steadily larger. The rails began humming beneath Ethan's feet. The station clock started ticking faster. Tick, 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 tick. The approaching light became blinding. Wind rushed through the underground chamber. Papers scattered. Dust swirled into the air. Then the train emerged. It wasn't old. It wasn't rusty. It looked brand new. Polished black steel reflected the lantern light like glass. Yet there was something deeply wrong about it. Every passenger sat perfectly still. No one spoke. No one blinked. Every face stared straight ahead. As the train slowed, Ethan realized why. Every passenger looked familiar. The first was the little girl in the white dress. Behind her sat James Walker from the Journal. Further back, Samuel, still wearing the same black suit. He slowly turned his head toward Ethan. His lips moved silently. 3 words. "Don't get on." The train stopped. Its doors opened with a soft hiss. No one stepped off. No one stepped on. The conductor appeared in the doorway. Tall. Black overcoat. Black hat. White gloves. Where his face should have been, there was only endless darkness. The faceless man raised one gloved hand. His voice rolled through the station like distant thunder. "All aboard." Then, from somewhere inside the train, a little girl laughed, and Ethan heard Lily's voice whisper from one of the passenger cars. "Daddy, I saved you a seat." End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Passenger List. The train doors remained open. Not a single passenger moved. Not a single head turned. Only the conductor stood waiting in the doorway, one white-gloved hand resting lightly on the brass railing. Behind the darkness where his face should have been, Ethan could feel something watching him. Patiently, confidently, as though it already knew how this night would end. The station clock clicked once. 3:04 a.m. The elderly ticket agent quietly folded her hands. He won't wait forever. Ethan didn't take his eyes off the train. What happens if I board? She answered without hesitation. You arrive. Where? She gave the smallest shake of her head. No one has ever described the destination. And if I don't? The woman's expression grew solemn. Then you'll keep walking through the house until it decides you've forgotten enough. Ethan frowned. Forgotten what? Yourself. A cold breeze swept through the station. The conductor slowly lifted a silver pocket watch from his coat. It was identical to the one Ethan had found in the basement. Only this one was ticking. Slowly, steadily. Tick, tick, tick. Each sound echoed through the station like a heartbeat. Ethan stepped backward. I'm not getting on. The conductor remained perfectly still. The ticket agent sighed. I was hoping you'd say that. She reached beneath the counter and placed another object beside the brass ticket. A leather-bound folder. Its cover was embossed with a single title. Passenger Manifest. The leather felt dry and brittle as Ethan opened it. Inside were hundreds of pages. Each listed names, dates, ages, arrival times, no departure times. He flipped through them. Entire families, children, sheriffs, travelers, journalists, even 3 state police officers from the newspaper article. Every person who had disappeared in Hollow Creek. Their names were all here. Then he found a page with today's date. October 14th, 2026. Only one name appeared. Walker, Ethan James. Status, pending. Beneath it, someone had written a note in fresh black ink. Seat reserved, car 7. His pulse quickened. I never gave anyone my name. The ticket agent looked genuinely puzzled. You didn't have to. She pointed toward the train. It already knew. A sudden noise echoed from the last passenger car. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was knocking on one of the windows. 3 slow knocks. Ethan turned. A little boy, no older than 10, pressed his hand against the glass. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. He mouthed a single word, "Run." Before Ethan could react, another passenger gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. It was Samuel. The old caretaker looked directly at Ethan and slowly shook his head. Not in warning, in sorrow. Then Samuel's eyes shifted toward the conductor, as if he was afraid to be seen communicating. The boy disappeared from the window. The conductor closed his pocket watch. Snap. The station lights dimmed. The train let out a deep metallic groan. The ticket agent suddenly grabbed Ethan's wrist. Her fingers were surprisingly strong. Listen to me. Her voice had changed. The warmth was gone. There are 2 kinds of people this house wants. The guilty and the curious. Ethan swallowed. Which one am I? She looked into his eyes for a long moment. That's what it's trying to decide. The ground beneath the platform trembled. The rails began humming again. The conductor took one slow step down onto the platform. His polished shoes made no sound. Another step. Closer. The darkness beneath his hat seemed to absorb the lantern light around him. Ethan instinctively backed away. Then something caught his eye. The conductor cast no shadow. Neither did the train. Every lantern in the station burned brightly. Yet neither produced the slightest shadow on the platform. The ticket agent noticed him staring. Don't look where his face should be. Too late. For the briefest instant, Ethan did. There was no face, no skull, no empty hood. Instead, he saw movement. Not in front of him, inside the darkness. Countless faces. Hundreds of them. Men, women, children, all silently staring outward, trapped within the impossible void where the conductor's face should have been. One face slowly drifted closer than the others. Lily. Her lips moved. She wasn't smiling. She looked terrified. She mouthed 4 words. Don't believe his voice. Ethan stumbled backward. The conductor stopped walking. The station instantly fell silent. When Ethan looked again, the darkness was empty. The faces were gone. The conductor spoke. For the first time, his voice carried emotion. Not anger. Not cruelty. Disappointment. You looked. The words echoed through every corner of the station. You weren't ready. The train whistle screamed. so loud that Ethan covered his ears. The platform shook violently. Cracks spread across the stone floor. The lanterns burst one after another. Glass shattered. Darkness rushed into the station. The ticket agent pushed Ethan hard. "Go!" He stumbled away from the platform. The brass ticket slipped from the counter and landed in his hand. The moment his fingers closed around it, the entire station vanished. The train, the passengers, the ticket booth, everything disappeared. Ethan found himself lying on the dusty floor of the Walker house's living room. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows. Birds sang outside. The fireplace was cold. For a long moment, he thought it had all been a nightmare. Then he looked at his right hand. Clutched tightly in his fist was the brass train ticket. Stamped across the front were 6 simple words. Return before the 7th sunrise. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The town that pretended nothing happened. For several seconds, Ethan simply lay on the living room floor. Sunlight poured through the tall windows. The warmth felt real. Birds chirped outside. A breeze drifted through the slightly open curtains. It was so ordinary that the events of the night already felt impossible. He looked at his watch. 8:17 a.m. The digital display worked normally again. His flashlight still rested beside him. The camera lay where he had dropped it. Nothing appeared disturbed. Except for one thing. The brass train ticket remained in his hand. Its edges were cold. Far colder than the morning air. Stamped across the front were the same 6 words. Return before the 7th sunrise. Ethan slipped it into his jacket pocket. If this had been a dream, the ticket shouldn't exist. Yet it did. He packed his equipment as quickly as he could. One thought filled his mind. Leave. Forget the story. Forget the house. Forget Hollow Creek. As he stepped onto the front porch, the morning seemed almost beautiful. Mist floated above the trees. The sky was bright blue. Nothing about the landscape suggested anything supernatural. His SUV sat exactly where he'd parked it. He climbed inside and turned the key. The engine started immediately. For the first time in nearly 12 hours, Ethan smiled. "I'm done." He shifted into drive. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as he rolled down the hill. 10 minutes later, he frowned. The road looked familiar. Too familiar. Another minute passed. The same crooked oak tree appeared beside the road. The same broken mailbox. The same rusted fence. He rounded the next bend. The Walker house stood directly ahead of him, exactly where it had been before. He slammed on the brakes. No. He checked the GPS, searching for signal. He made a U-turn. This time he drove faster. 15 minutes. 20. 30. The forest never changed. Every curve led back to the same hill. The same house. The same open iron gate. His fuel gauge had dropped nearly a quarter of a tank. The road wasn't looping. He was actually driving. Somehow, every direction led back. By noon, Ethan gave up. He parked beneath a large maple tree and walked toward town. If he couldn't leave, perhaps someone could explain what was happening. Hollow Creek looked surprisingly peaceful in daylight. Children rode bicycles down Main Street. An elderly man swept the sidewalk outside a hardware store. A couple sat outside a small cafe drinking coffee. It felt impossible that this was the same place where Martha had warned him only yesterday. Several people smiled politely as he passed. No one seemed frightened. No one seemed unusual. He entered the cafe. A small bell chimed above the door. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon filled the room. A waitress approached with a friendly smile. "You must be staying at the Walker House." Ethan froze. "How did you know?" "We always know." She handed him a menu. "What can I get you?" "Coffee." She nodded. "And breakfast." He realized he was starving. "Sure." As she walked away, Ethan noticed every customer stealing quick glances toward him. Not obvious stares, just brief looks. The kind reserved for strangers, or people everyone expected to see. His coffee arrived. It tasted surprisingly good, almost comforting. The waitress returned with eggs, bacon, toast, and hash browns. She placed the plate in front of him. "On the house. I didn't ask for. Everyone gets one free meal." Everyone. The first day. Ethan looked up. What happens after the first day? Her smile faded. "We don't usually ask that." Before he could respond, the bell above the entrance rang again. Martha Collins walked inside carrying the same wicker basket, the same apples, the same faded blue dress. She sat across from Ethan without asking. "I hoped you'd still be here. I tried to leave." "I know. You knew that would happen." She nodded quietly. "You could have warned me. You wouldn't have believed me." Ethan sighed. "No, I probably wouldn't have." Martha glanced toward the window. "The house lets everyone leave." Ethan leaned forward. "It didn't let me. It will. When? When it's finished." His appetite vanished. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, Martha picked up one of the sugar packets on the table. She emptied the sugar into a neat little circle. Then she placed her coffee cup in the middle. "The town," she said softly, "is like this cup." She tapped the circle. "The house is the circle around it." Ethan watched silently. "It doesn't trap everyone. It traps the people it remembers." He frowned. "What if I never come back?" Martha looked genuinely sad. "You already came back. I've never been here before." She slowly reached into her purse. Without saying a word, she handed him an old photograph. It showed a family standing beside the Hollow Creek welcome sign. A man, a woman, a smiling 8-year-old boy. The boy wore a red baseball cap. Ethan's breath caught. He still had that cap somewhere in storage. His parents had thrown almost every childhood photo away after the divorce. He had never seen this picture before. Yet he remembered the day. The family vacation. The unexpected detour. The old hill. The gray house. Rain beginning to fall. His father saying, "We'll stop here for just a minute." A memory surfaced with startling clarity. A little girl standing on the porch, waving. Then, nothing. The memory simply ended. Ethan looked at the back of the photograph. Written in faded blue ink were 6 words. He opened the door in 1994. His hands began to shake. "I was here." Martha nodded. "Yes. My parents brought me." They never meant to. Why don't I remember? She looked toward the Walker house on the distant hill. Because the house wasn't interested in you. She paused. It was interested in your father. Silence settled between them. Then Martha whispered the words Ethan had feared hearing since the first night. But when he escaped, it remembered you instead. Outside the cafe window, every person on Main Street stopped walking at exactly the same moment. The children on their bicycles froze. The elderly man lowered his broom. Every face slowly turned toward the hill. A church bell rang once. Martha closed her eyes. He woke up. Ethan looked toward the Walker house. Every curtain on the second floor moved at the same time, as though dozens of people had stepped up to the windows to watch him. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. The Boy Who Escaped. Every curtain on the second floor settled at the same moment. The house stood perfectly still again. If Ethan hadn't seen the movement himself, he would have convinced himself it had been nothing more than a trick of the wind. Martha rose slowly from her chair. You shouldn't stay in town after noon. Why? She looked toward the church at the end of Main Street. Because that's when people begin forgetting. Forgetting what? They were ever afraid. Without another word, she picked up her basket and walked outside. Ethan hurried after her. Martha! She didn't stop. The photograph, he called. Tell me what happened in 1994. She paused. For a long moment, she stood with her back to him. Then she quietly said, You should ask someone who was there. I am. She turned. No. You were only a child. The person you need to speak with is your father. The words followed Ethan all the way back to the Walker house. His father, Richard Walker. They hadn't spoken in nearly 12 years. After the divorce, the relationship had slowly disappeared beneath birthdays that became phone calls, then text messages, then silence. Richard now lived alone in Arizona. Or at least, he had the last time Ethan checked. Could his father really have known about Hollow Creek? The thought seemed absurd. Yet the old photograph proved one thing. He had been here before. Inside the house, daylight made everything appear almost ordinary. The living room looked exactly as it had the day before. The fireplace, the old piano, the family portraits. Nothing had moved, except the photograph above the mantel now showed only 4 people. The youngest girl had vanished. Ethan stared. He was certain she had been there. He stepped closer. No empty space. No torn paper. No sign that anyone had ever stood beside the family. His memory insisted otherwise. The picture disagreed. His phone suddenly vibrated. For the first time since arriving, it showed 1 bar of service. Without hesitating, Ethan dialed his father's number. 1 ring. 2, 3. Click. A tired voice answered. Hello, Dad. Silence. Ethan. Yeah. Another long silence. I haven't heard from you in years. I know. What happened? Ethan glanced around the empty living room. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Were we ever in Tennessee when I was a kid? Nothing. The silence stretched so long Ethan thought the call had dropped. Finally, where are you? Hollow Creek. The line filled with static. His father's breathing became uneven. "Ethan." His voice had changed. "You need to leave." "I've tried." "No. You don't understand. I can't." His father whispered something Ethan almost couldn't hear. "It found you, Dad." "What happened here?" Another long pause. When Richard finally spoke, his voice sounded older than Ethan had ever heard it. "When you were 8, you disappeared." Ethan froze. "What?" "For almost 3 hours." "I don't remember that." "I know. Mom never told me. Because we agreed never to." Richard took a shaky breath. "We stopped at an old house because your mother wanted directions." "I remember rain." "So do I." "You wandered inside." Ethan closed his eyes. Tiny fragments surfaced. A hallway. A little girl smiling. A grandfather clock. Then darkness. "What happened?" "We searched everywhere. The sheriff came. Half the town came." Richard's voice cracked. "Then you walked out by yourself. 3 hours later. You said you'd been playing." Ethan's chest tightened. "Playing with who?" Richard answered so quietly that Ethan barely heard him. "A little girl in a white dress." The room suddenly felt colder. Ethan looked toward the staircase. Empty. Richard continued. "She told you her name was Emily." The name struck Ethan like a hammer. Emily. He had never heard it before. Yet somehow, it felt painfully familiar. "You kept asking why she couldn't come home with us." Richard's breathing grew heavier. "When we drove away, you cried for almost an hour. You kept saying." Richard stopped. "What?" "You said, 'She's still standing on the porch.'" Ethan slowly turned toward the front window. The porch was empty. Then his father whispered something that made his blood run cold. "We couldn't see anyone." A sharp knock interrupted the call. 3 slow knocks. From upstairs. Not the front door. The ceiling. Knock. 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 Richard immediately heard it through the phone. His voice became urgent. "Ethan, don't answer." "I wasn't going to." "You don't understand." "The first time I answered." The call suddenly filled with deafening static. Richard shouted through the noise. "Listen carefully. If she asks you to play again." The connection broke. Call failed. No signal. Ethan lowered the phone. The knocking came again. This time from the second-floor hallway. Then, soft footsteps. A child's footsteps. Running. Laughing. Stopping directly above him. The old grandfather clock began ticking again. Tick. Tock. Tick. Tock. The pendulum swung exactly 11 times. Then stopped. A small red rubber ball rolled slowly down the staircase. Bump. 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 It came to rest against Ethan's boot. He bent down and picked it up. The faded surface was cracked with age. Written across one side in black marker were 2 words. "Property of Emily." At that exact moment, a little girl's cheerful voice drifted down from the second floor. Not whispering. Not crying. Simply happy. "Ethan." A brief pause. "I found your hiding place." End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12. Hide and Seek. The red rubber ball felt heavier than it should have. Ethan stared at the faded lettering. Property of Emily. The little girl's voice drifted through the house again. Bright. Cheerful. Exactly the way children sounded on warm summer afternoons. Ethan. Another pause. It's your turn. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Then another. Small footsteps crossed the hallway. Not running. Skipping. Tap, tap, tap. A child's laughter followed. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't threatening. That somehow made it worse. Ethan slowly backed toward the front door. He refused to look up the staircase. Samuel's warnings echoed in his mind. The house borrows voices. It learns what you'll follow. The laughter stopped. Silence filled the house. Then Emily spoke again. You're hiding again. You always hide here. A cold chill spread across Ethan's shoulders. Always. Not today. Not tonight. Always. As if this conversation had happened before. He reached for the front door. Unlocked. His hand trembled as he turned the knob. The door opened. Bright afternoon sunlight flooded the entryway. For one hopeful second, Ethan thought the nightmare might finally be ending. He stepped outside. The porch looked normal. The maple trees swayed gently in the breeze. Birds sang from somewhere beyond the hill. He took another step. Then another. The wooden porch groaned beneath his boots. Behind him, the front door quietly closed. Click. He walked down the steps. The gravel driveway stretched toward the road. Freedom. Halfway to his SUV, he noticed something strange. The tire tracks in the gravel. There weren't just one set. There were dozens. Some looked fresh. Others had nearly disappeared beneath years of weather. Every set led toward the house. None led away. His stomach tightened. He followed one of the oldest tracks with his eyes. They stopped halfway down the driveway, as though the vehicle had simply vanished. A breeze rustled the trees. Something white fluttered beneath the old maple. A sheet of paper. Ethan picked it up. It was a child's drawing. A house. A family. A little girl standing on the porch. Beside her stood a young boy wearing a red baseball cap. His heart skipped. He recognized the cap immediately. The drawing had been made with crayons. Across the top, written in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Me and Ethan." He turned the paper over. Another sentence appeared in blue pencil. "Thank you for playing with me." The handwriting looked decades old. His fingers began to shake. No. A memory surfaced. Not a complete memory. Just fragments. Rain tapping against windows. The smell of old wood. A little girl laughing. Count to 100. I'll hide first. He pressed both hands against his temples. The memory vanished before he could grasp it. The front porch suddenly creaked behind him. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan turned. Emily stood at the top of the steps. She looked exactly as she had in the old photograph. White dress, bare feet, long brown hair tied with a faded blue ribbon. Unlike before, her face looked completely normal. She smiled shyly. "You remembered." Ethan didn't answer. She took one careful step forward. I've been waiting. His pulse hammered in his ears. You aren't real. Emily tilted her head. I was. The answer caught him off guard. Not I am. I was. She looked toward the woods beyond the house. My brother said you'd come back. You have a brother. She nodded. He watches the train. A cold sensation spread through Ethan's chest. The faceless conductor. My brother doesn't look like he used to. Emily's smile faded. The house took his face first. Wind swept across the hill. For the first time, Emily looked frightened. He doesn't remember me anymore. The sadness in her voice sounded painfully real. I don't want to forget. Ethan found himself taking one slow step toward her. Every instinct screamed that this was a mistake. But something about her felt different. She wasn't asking him to open a door. She wasn't trying to lure him inside. She simply stood there, alone. Then she quietly asked, "Do you remember the tree?" Another memory struck him. A huge oak tree behind the house. A rope swing. A rusted metal box buried beneath its roots. He gasped. I buried something. Emily smiled. You said it was treasure. What was in it? You don't remember? No. She looked genuinely disappointed. I promised I wouldn't tell. A deep church bell echoed from town. 1, 2, 3. Emily's smile disappeared instantly. She looked over Ethan's shoulder toward the road. Her eyes widened. He's coming. Who? My brother. The air grew noticeably colder. The birds stopped singing. Even the wind seemed to vanish. Emily stepped backward toward the porch. You have to find the box. What box? Beneath the oak tree. What's inside? She looked directly into his eyes. The only memory he couldn't take. A shadow slowly stretched across the driveway. It moved against the direction of the sun. Long, thin, human, but attached to nothing. Emily whispered urgently, Don't let him see you remembering. The shadow stopped only a few feet behind Ethan. He hadn't heard footsteps. He hadn't heard breathing. Only silence. Emily's eyes filled with fear. Without another word, she ran back into the house. The front door slammed shut. Ethan remained frozen. Slowly, very slowly, a white-gloved hand rested on his shoulder. A calm voice spoke from directly behind him. You've been talking to my sister. Ethan closed his eyes. He already knew who it was. The faceless conductor had finally left the train. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. The box beneath the oak. The white-gloved hand rested lightly on Ethan's shoulder. It wasn't cold. It wasn't warm. It felt empty, as though nothing physical had touched him at all. The voice behind him remained calm. You've been talking to my sister. Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the old oak tree at the edge of the property. Emily's words echoed in his mind. The only memory he couldn't take. He took a slow breath. I don't know what you're talking about. The hand remained on his shoulder. You've always been a poor liar. A long silence followed. Then the pressure disappeared. Ethan turned. The man in the black coat stood only a few feet away. His hat cast a shadow over the place where his face should have been. Inside that impossible darkness, faint shapes drifted like smoke. He remembered Samuel's warning. Don't look where his face should be. So Ethan lowered his eyes. The conductor noticed. You've learned. I've survived. A quiet chuckle emerged from the darkness. Not yet. The conductor folded his gloved hands behind his back. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he asked, "Do you know why Emily still remembers you?" Ethan remained silent. "Because you were the only child who ever came back." The words settled over the hill like a heavy fog. What happened to her? The conductor looked toward the house. She waited. For who? For you. A breeze moved through the branches of the old oak. Hundreds of dry leaves drifted to the ground. The conductor watched them fall. Children measure time differently. They believe promises. You told her you would return tomorrow. Ethan felt another memory trying to surface. A rainy afternoon. Two children laughing beneath the oak tree. A small metal box. A pinky promise. Then, his father shouting from the road. Ethan. The memory disappeared again. I was 8. Yes. I didn't know. No. The conductor nodded almost sympathetically. That's why she waited. His voice became quieter. At first, the words chilled Ethan more than any threat. At first, days became months. Months became years. The house kept her. And eventually, it kept me. The conductor turned slowly toward the house. I was her older brother. Ethan stared. You. My name was Daniel. I don't remember you. I know. The house preferred that. Daniel slowly removed one white glove. His hand looked completely normal. Human. Older than it should have been. A silver wedding ring still rested on one finger. I tried to take her away. What happened? I opened the wrong door. The glove slipped back over his hand. The house doesn't always kill. Sometimes it gives you a job. Silence filled the hill. For the first time, Ethan felt something unexpected. Not fear. Pity. Daniel had once been human. He had once been a brother trying to save his sister. What do you want from me? Daniel looked toward the oak tree. The same thing Emily wants. Then why stop me? Because remembering has a price. What price? You'll lose something else. Ethan frowned. What? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he quietly stepped aside. The path to the oak tree was now clear. You still have a choice. The words surprised Ethan. I thought I was trapped. You are. Then what choice? How you leave? Daniel raised one gloved hand toward the tree. Beneath those roots is the last memory the house couldn't erase. It has spent 32 years trying. If you uncover it, everything changes. Ethan hesitated only a moment before running toward the oak. The ground beneath the tree was soft, exactly where his memory had led him. He grabbed a broken tree branch and began digging. The soil came away easily. 6 inches. A foot. Then, clang. Metal. His heart raced. He cleared away the remaining dirt. A small rusted lunchbox emerged from the earth. Spider-Man stickers, faded almost white with age, still clung to the lid. His breath caught. I remember. His father had given him that lunchbox when he started 3rd grade. Hands shaking, Ethan opened it. Inside were only 3 items: a smooth white stone, a friendship bracelet woven from blue yarn, and a folded sheet of paper. He opened the note carefully. The handwriting belonged to a child. His own. "Dear future me, Emily says grown-ups forget important things. If you find this, it means you came back like you promised. Don't trust the man with no face. He cries when nobody is looking. Emily says he wasn't always mean. She says the house is lonely. It makes people stay because it doesn't know how to say goodbye. If I forget, remind me. Love, Ethan." Tears filled his eyes. The final sentence unlocked something. Not a memory. Hundreds of them. The rainy afternoon. Emily laughing on the rope swing. Daniel pushing them higher. The 3 of them burying the lunchbox beneath the tree. Daniel promising, "If you ever get scared, remember where we hid tomorrow." Tomorrow. Not treasure. Tomorrow. They had hidden the memory itself. To keep the house from taking it. The world around Ethan suddenly shook. The sky darkened. The Walker house groaned like an old ship in a storm. Windows shattered. The front door burst open. A deafening scream echoed from somewhere deep inside. Not human. Not animal. Ancient. Daniel closed his eyes. It knows. Cracks spread across the hill. The earth trembled beneath Ethan's feet. The friendship bracelet suddenly glowed with a faint blue light. Daniel looked at it with disbelief. "I never thought it survived." "What is it?" He smiled sadly. "Proof." "Proof of what?" "That friendship is stronger than memory." The scream from the house became louder. Every window turned completely black. Dozens of shadowy figures appeared behind the glass. Watching. Waiting. Daniel looked toward the front porch. His voice was barely above a whisper. "It's coming." From within the darkness of the doorway, something enormous began to emerge. Not the conductor. Not Emily. Not a ghost. The house itself was finally sending out the thing that had been hiding inside it all along. And for the first time since Ethan arrived in Hollow Creek, Daniel looked afraid. End of Chapter 13. Chapter 14. Sunrise over Hollow Creek. The thing in the doorway did not step outside. It unfolded. At first, Ethan thought the house itself was collapsing. The walls bent inward. The roof seemed to breathe. Every broken window became a dark, unblinking eye. The ancient oak groaned as its branches twisted toward the house. The air filled with whispers. Thousands of them. Every voice Ethan had heard since arriving returned at once. Children. Parents. Travelers. Sheriffs. Families. Each calling a different name. Each begging someone to stay. Daniel stepped in front of Ethan. "Don't listen." The whispers grew louder. "We're alone. Don't leave. We miss you. You promised." The friendship bracelet in Ethan's hand grew warmer. Its faded blue threads began glowing with a soft light. Not bright enough to blind. Just bright enough to push back the darkness around them. The enormous shape inside the doorway stopped moving. For the first time, it hesitated. Daniel stared at the bracelet. "It remembers." Ethan frowned. "What does?" "Hope." The word echoed strangely across the hill. The whispers faltered. The house trembled again. Emily suddenly appeared beside the old oak tree. She looked exactly as she had before. Not frightening. Not ghostly. Just a little girl with dirt on her bare feet and a blue ribbon in her hair. She smiled at Ethan. "You remembered." "I did." "You kept your promise." Tears filled Ethan's eyes. "I'm sorry it took so long." Emily shook her head. "You came back. That's enough." The smile she gave him was small but genuine. For the first time since Ethan had met her, she looked at peace. Daniel slowly removed his hat. Where endless darkness had hidden his face, a human face slowly returned. At first, only his eyes appeared. Then his nose, his mouth. His features slowly emerged as though painted by the morning light itself. He looked no older than 25, the same age he had probably been when he disappeared. He smiled at his sister. "I almost forgot you." Emily reached over and took his hand. "You didn't." The ground beneath the Walker house shook violently. Cracks spread across its foundation. Not like an earthquake. More like something beneath the house was finally letting go. The front porch collapsed inward. The windows shattered outward. The whispers became cries. Not cries of anger. Cries of loneliness. Ethan suddenly understood. Samuel had been right. The house had never hunted because it hated people. It had trapped them because it couldn't bear being empty. It had collected memories the way lonely people collect photographs, trying desperately to hold on to anyone who ever entered. Ethan stepped toward the house. Daniel reached for him. "No." But Ethan kept walking. He stopped a few feet from the broken doorway. "I know you're here." The whispers quieted. "I know you're afraid." Silence. "You don't have to keep anyone anymore." The wind died completely. The morning sun slowly rose above the trees, sending its first golden rays across Hollow Creek. The sunlight touched the front steps, then the porch, then the doorway. The darkness inside retreated. Not quickly, not violently, gently, like a long night finally giving way to dawn. A single voice answered, soft, almost childlike. "I didn't want to be alone." Ethan smiled sadly. "I know." He placed the friendship bracelet on the front step. "You won't be." For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then the bracelet lifted into the air by itself. The blue threads unraveled into hundreds of tiny strands of light. They drifted upward like fireflies. Each strand floated toward a different window of the old house. One by one, faces began appearing. The little girl in the white dress. The families from the photographs. The sheriff. Samuel. The passengers from the midnight train. Every face smiled peacefully. Not trapped. Not frightened. Simply grateful. Emily squeezed Daniel's hand. "I think we're going home." Daniel nodded. "I think we always could." The sunlight grew brighter. The old gray house slowly became transparent. Its walls faded like morning fog. Its roof dissolved into the golden sky. Within moments, nothing remained. Only the hill, the ancient oak tree, and fresh green grass where the Walker house had once stood. The silence that followed was unlike any Ethan had experienced there. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. The weight pressing against his chest since the first night was gone. His phone vibrated. Full signal. He looked at the screen. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. His father. Ethan pressed play. His father's voice filled the quiet morning. "Ethan, if you're hearing this, I hope you made it out." A pause. "I've spent 32 years running from that place. I'm done running. I'm driving there. I should have gone back a long time ago." Ethan smiled. He immediately called him. Richard answered on the first ring. "Ethan, I'm okay." His father didn't speak. Ethan could hear him crying quietly. "I'm okay, Dad." Another long silence. Finally, Richard laughed through the tears. "I've wanted to hear those words for a very long time." "So have I." After they hung up, Ethan walked into Hollow Creek. The town looked different. Children played baseball near the church. People waved as they passed. The strange heaviness was gone. Even Martha Collins looked younger somehow. She met him outside the cafe. "You did it. We all did." She smiled. The town remembers sunshine again. Months later, Ethan published a very different story than the one he had planned. He never mentioned ghosts. He never mentioned monsters. He simply wrote about forgotten places, broken promises, forgiveness, and the importance of going back when your heart tells you something has been left unfinished. The article became his most widely read piece. People called it fiction. Ethan never corrected them. Every October 14th, he returned to Hollow Creek. Not because he was afraid, because he had made a promise. He would leave a small blue friendship bracelet beneath the old oak tree. Every year, by the following morning, it would be gone. And somewhere in the gentle breeze that moved through the leaves, he could almost hear 2 familiar voices. A little girl laughing. An older brother telling her it was time to go home. Ethan would smile, tip his hat toward the tree, and continue down the quiet country road, knowing that some stories don't end because evil is defeated. They end because someone finally remembers to keep a promise. The end.